Greetings of peace and welcome to today's panel discussion. My name is Tabassum Haleem, and I am the CEO at Islamic Networks Group, which is also known as ING. We are a peace-building organization providing face-to-face education and engagement opportunities that foster understanding of Muslims and other misunderstood groups to promote harmony among all people. It is my pleasure to introduce my co-moderator for this panel discussion, Shakila Ahmed. Shakila is an ING trustee and long-term leader in her local community, where she served as the chair of the Board of Trustees of the Islamic Center of Greater Cincinnati for 5 years and established its outreach work at inception. Welcome, Shakila.
Thank you so much, Tabassum. It's great to see you, and welcome again to our audience. As you all know, we're in the middle of Women's History Month, and so we wanted to take this opportunity to highlight the vital roles which Muslim women play in society and their many, many contributions. Representation for Muslim women in society matters a great deal, especially in religious leadership. Female religious leadership is vital not only for providing female perspectives on general topics of concern in society, but also for specific issues relating to women. Our discussion today, which highlights Muslim women in religious leadership, is actually an extension of a long overlooked tradition of Muslim women who have contributed historically as educators, as scholars, as professors, and judges as well. So business leaders, philanthropists, and even heads of state are not excluded. Today, we're going to learn about another form of religious leadership for Muslim women in the field of chaplaincy. Just before we do that, Tabassum will introduce our esteemed panelists. Tabassum?
Thank you, Shakila. And now to introduce our panelists, whose cameras will come on as I introduce them. With us today are Dr. Nisa Muhammad, who is from Howard University's Assistant Dean for Religious Life. Welcome, Nisa. Sondos Kholaki, who serves as a hospital staff chaplain and a community chaplain in Southern California. Welcome, Sondos. And Amira Quraishi, who serves as college chaplain and Muslim life coordinator at Wellesley College. All of these women have extensive bios, which we've posted on our website for this event. We now want to turn our attention to them. So why don't we begin by you telling us what kind of work you do as a chaplain. Many people are not familiar with what a chaplain does. How about we start with you, Nisa?
Assalamu alaikum. Thank you so much for inviting me and having me here. I want to thank the organizers for this event. So I'm responsible for religious programming at Howard University, and I work with the students, faculty, and staff. And as a chaplain, I'm responsible for being a guide for students and helping them at some of the most critical points of their life in terms of making decisions for anything from race to relationships to religion, to deciding what classes they're going to choose, to how religious they're going to be, to making really some of the most important decisions a young person can make in their lives. I don't have the answers, but I help guide them to find the answers that they're going to make.
Absolutely. That is so important. And Amira, is it the same at Wellesley?
Very much the same. Both Nisa and I work at in higher education institutes. My college is a little different. It's a women's college. It's a small liberal arts college, and very much like what Nisa was saying, we support students in discovering their spirituality. And one of the things that I've noticed at Wellesley College that's maybe similar to communities, but what I've found is different is the breadth of individuals who come to us, not only non-Muslims, but I've had students who say, like, my grandfather was Muslim and I don't really know anything about it. Can I come to Jummah prayers and learn? So we play very much an educational role as well. We're open to the whole college for all students to learn and explore the different possibilities of faith. And I very much, since we're a women's college, want to instill in these young students the ability to discover in their own spirituality and lead for the community.
You make a really good point about being a women's college. That must be a very unique environment. And I can only imagine the interactions. Thank you for that. And Sondos, you're a chaplain at a hospital. What is the role of a chaplain in that environment?
Assalamu alaikum, everyone, and thank you to ING and Tabassum, the entire team, and my fellow panelists. So what Nisa and Amira just offered everybody resonates a lot with my work. I would add on that my role as a hospital chaplain is to accompany those in crisis, emotionally and spiritually. So crisis will look a little bit different in the hospital setting than it would on a campus setting, although I'm sure there are overlaps. In my role as chaplain at the hospital, I provide prayer for patients. I provide resources, help to facilitate rituals and practices. I listen. I do a lot of listening and accompanying for patients, for staff, and for patient families, so anybody within the hospital context. And I would add that probably the most beautiful thing about chaplains is that we get to be with people in their most raw and vulnerable state. And it is very much a prophetic practice that we have the gift of being able to sit with those who are oppressed, with those who are heartbroken, with those who are sick, with those who are in need spiritually, emotionally, intellectually, everything. And that is where Allah tells us that He is actually the closest to us when we are in those states. And so a chaplain being able to enter into that space with somebody else is truly, truly a gift.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much to our panelists. It's really inspiring listening to all of you and the compassion and passion with which you play your role. One thing that perhaps you run across, because we have, and even planning the panel, is do people often confuse you with the role of an imam? And would you qualify as an imam? And if not, why not? I think it's important for people to understand that. So Amira, maybe we'll start with you.
I think functionally, I do pretty much the same thing as a local imam. I mean, imam generally means the person who leads the prayer, who leads the community, and that trust is instilled from the community themselves. You'll find that some female chaplains adopt the title of Ustadha, which I think is actually higher than imam because it comes with more credentialing. An imam of a community is, like I said, is entrusted with that based on their character and the faith that the community puts in that individual. So functionally, I do much the same as an imam. Perhaps there's differences of opinion on that.
We really appreciate your perspective and how you play that role at a women's college in particular. So, Nisa, is it any different in the African American communities and as far as how they might view this issue of an imam versus a chaplain?
So I think that perhaps there may be some differences. I think so that imam particularly leads the prayer. I don't lead the prayer at Howard University. I mean, we have an imam comes on Friday for Jummah. I organize the prayer services at our university. So an imam does come in and leads the prayer. So I don't see myself as an imam. I think my role and responsibilities are clearly unique and different. Some chaplains are imams. I don't see myself as an imam, but I think a lot of my responsibilities are similar to what an imam does. And so I think that for some things that an imam has a unique job, I think chaplains have unique jobs also. And I think that because chaplains are a new responsibility for sisters. People want to always hold the imam at such high esteem, but now there are these women doing these things, but can they also be imams, as opposed to looking at chaplains and their unique and powerful role in and of themselves, and just seeing that what we do and not having to always try to equate what we do with something that a man does, as opposed to just looking at what we do and being satisfied and saying, this is a great thing that sisters are doing, and not having to just justify it in terms of what a man does. And being just, I'm happy being a chaplain and not having to try to qualify myself or equate myself with what a man does as an imam.
Thank you so much for, sharing that perspective. I think it is important for people to understand the unique roles and responsibility. And yeah, by all means, there's a lot of overlap because they're both service roles. So, Sondos, have you had patients that view you as an imam or have asked for one, even though you're able to pray with them?
No, I don't think I've ever gotten mixed up with an imam. I think that is something, because chaplain is a title that is very new to our community. I think it has been easier for our male chaplain colleagues to be able to come in as an imam if chaplain doesn't resonate right away with the care seeker. But even within our chaplaincy circles, I think we are all becoming more aware that that's actually going to take away from our role rather than enhance it, to conflate the two terms. And I've had such beautiful, rich discussions with my imam colleagues about this. Like, what makes you an imam and me a chaplain? And could you take on the chaplain title and me the imam title? And can that be interchangeable? And I think the takeaways from that conversation that we've had is that really there's different training and different functions, although there is, again, overlap. I would say imam or a sheikh is somebody, imam linguistically is a leader, but that's also often conflated by the community as somebody who has classically trained in theology and Islamic law. When chaplains are trained and educated in like psycho-spiritual, so we touch upon those things, but we also train a lot in counseling and a lot of other pastoral elements. So I guess it also depends on how you define imam. So when the care seeker is coming to an imam, they may be looking for something different than when they come to the chaplain. They should actually. There should be two very different conversations being had. Is the imam a teacher? Are they a counselor? Are they just one who needs prayer? Are they all three? And so I think similar to what Nisa said, although I appreciate Amira's perspective too, especially on a female campus, that we really can embrace our role as chaplain, and that it really is unique and it really is an honor to be able to hold that. And I think educating the community more on what a chaplain does and is probably the best way to go.
Thank you so much. That really, I think, is helpful for all of you to share those perspectives.
Yes, thank you, Shakila, for really asking that question. That leads me to my next question, because chaplain maybe is a term that's more familiar in the general population, where imam may be more specific to the Muslim population. So my question is, are all your clients Muslim? If not, how do non-Muslims seeking services respond to you? Sondos, why don't we begin with you, since it's probably an issue for you more than college chaplains?
I'd be interested to hear from the college chaplains too on this. But as a hospital chaplain, I actually serve in two different capacities at two hospitals. At Hoag Hospital, I am a staff chaplain. So when I am there present during my shift, I'm the only chaplain covering the entire hospital. So I see people of all faiths and no faiths. And I think I actually visit Muslim patients, like that's the minority of who I see. Versus at Cedar Sinai, where I also serve, I am specifically a Muslim chaplain, and I only see Muslim patients there. So it's a very, very different role and function. How do they react? I have a range of reactions. So you can imagine if you are putting in a consult request for a chaplain and you're sitting in a hospital, and then I show up, right? I'm not the conventional, what people often expect a chaplain to be, which is pretty cool. Alhamdulillah, thank God, I have a range, and like there's a spectrum of reactions, but most of all, it's positive. There's a lot of curiosity and openness, a lot of questions where I have to kind of deflect it back to the care seeker, so it's not all about me. And at the very least, there will be a polite request for a chaplain of their faith tradition, which is actually part of my role to do, is to facilitate that for them, whether it's calling up the local church or a local parish and getting somebody, their priest or their pastor, or calling one of my chaplain friends and say, this person's from a Christian tradition and they would like somebody who speaks that language, right, that religious, spiritual language. And so I'll help facilitate that. But overall, alhamdulillah, there's been an openness to understand and to learn.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you. It's, I was just imagining when a person who hasn't seen you before asking for a chaplain, and I just can imagine the instant learning that people gain just by encountering you without you even saying a word. So that is very, very cool.
If I may add to this, also Muslim patients, I often get the same reaction. So I'm just putting that out there, like, you're what? Who are you? What are you here for? So there's, in both situations, there's some explaining that is done.
Yes, that's so wonderful. Just a teaching moment before you even start speaking. That's very, very sweet. Very nice. So is it an issue for you, Nisa and Amira? And tell us, what do you find to be the most pressing issues facing students these days? And what advice do you give them? And please take your time, because I have 4 sons, and they on campus, we did get a chance to meet the different chaplains, especially where we live in Chicago. 2 of my sons went to Northwestern, and they have an amazing chaplain there, Sister Tahira. So would love to hear Nisa or Amira, whoever wants to go first on this.
Yeah, I can talk about that. So I'm the Assistant Dean for Religious Life. And so I work with all the students at the university. And so I had an interesting situation where a student came to the area where all the chaplains are. And it was a Monday when I just happened to be the chaplain on duty, and it was a Christian student, and they were looking for another chaplain. And I just happened to be the one on duty. And she came looking around, and I said, can I help you? She said, well, I'm looking for a chaplain. I said, here I am. She said, well, I was looking for one of the other chaplains. And I said, I'm sure, I can help you. She said, well, no, I don't think so. And I said, really, come into my office. I'm pretty sure I can help you. And she kind of hemmed and hawed and looked kind of hesitant, and then finally came into my office and kind of, she had some concerns. Her grandfather had died over the weekend, and she, had some grief issues. And, we talked, and after her hesitancy, I couldn't get rid of her the whole semester. And, because I know I've been trained to be a chaplain, and I've been trained to work with students regardless of their faith. And I know that Islam has the answer to everything. And so I know that regardless of what a student's issue is, regardless of their faith, no faith, wandering, wondering, whatever it is, I know that I can help them. And so I have students come to me with a myriad of issues. A student wants to drop out of school. A student wants to, leave school, to get married. A Muslim student wants to leave school to get married, is having pressure from their family, wants to leave school and get married. students who, I had a student that, was interested in Buddhism, and we talked about, Buddhism. And I said, what do you know about, Buddhism? Tell me what you know about Buddhism. And it said, what do you want to know? How have you learned about Buddhism? And, they want to know more about any kind of faith. And so I'm trained to explore with students all of their questions, all of their issues. And so being an assistant dean helps me, as a title, helps me to work with students regardless of their area, their interest, because I know that students are in the process of changing their mind. They come in as freshmen, and by the time they leave, when they graduate, their mind has changed so many times from this to that to whatever. And I just help to accompany them on their journey. And I am clear that I am a guide for them on their journey from point A to wherever they go. I am just a light on the journey. I am a sign on this journey, good, bad, and the ugly. I help them call home when they don't have an A and they thought they were going to get an A and it's a B on their transcript, and they have to explain that. I'm just a guide for them on their journey. You're muted.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful. Thank you so much. And Amira, please share your experiences.
Sure. Much like what Sister Nisa said, counseling and supporting students on their path. You asked about working with students who are not Muslim. Yes, definitely. Just like Sister Nisa said, I had a similar story of a student, a first year, it was late at night and I was just wrapping up a program. Our multi-faith center is below the chapel, and she was Catholic and had just broken up with her boyfriend, and it was like 10 o'clock on a Saturday, and she was looking for a rosary, and she was so surprised that I would support her in getting through that moment. And at one moment I said, would you like me to sit and pray with you? I'll pray the way I pray, but you can pray the way you pray, and we'll just sit together. And through her tears, she was like, yes. So many situations like that. Also, I also facilitate multi-faith engagement on campus. So I lead the multi-faith council. What I hear from a lot of students, and I don't want to just give away all Wellesley secrets. I'm referring back to my time at Johns Hopkins as well. I was the Muslim chaplain many years ago when I first started there. But what is consistent over this, even the last 10 some years that I've been doing this, the developmental stage of emerging adulthood is very much characterized by searching for answers of who they are, how they integrate their values that their parents had given them or maybe hadn't given them, and how do they choose what values they're going to then rely on for the future, and they have to determine what matters to them. Many students feel like the religion that they grew up with wasn't helpful, but they're still searching. And some of them feel that that it was helpful, but then they get to college and what they understand as their religion is not what other people understand to be. So there's some conflicts of understanding there. So my role with groups like the Multi-Faith Council and just in general on campus is not only to uphold diversity and inclusion, but to support conversations where people can open up and understand one another in the process of learning themselves, so that it's not just a one and done, I'm a Muslim, and then, and that's the end of story. People are evolving. We're all evolving. Another thing that I work on with students is this environment where, and this, maybe others can speak to this, but this environment that is almost afraid to talk about religion, any religion. So when I interact with a Christian student, she may actually be really relieved to be able to say the word God or faith with me as a Muslim. And so that's really refreshing to her, even though she may never have met a Muslim before, or have assumptions about Muslims. It's a refreshing to her to be able to even talk about faith. I wanted to just say one thing, and forgive me for backtracking a little bit, but before I lose the thought, Sondos, you talked about the titles, imam, chaplain, and so forth, and Sondos had mentioned the concern about conflating titles, and that just made me think of something that might be helpful, keeping in mind that we are living in an environment that has certain assumptions about preconceived notions about clergy in general. So a priest, a reverend, a rabbi, and as the Muslim community has grown up, we have been seen as a community that must have something like that. And so the title imam has kind of been, I don't know, have sort of slid into this role, similar role, even though in Muslim societies before it may not have had the same, carried the same responsibilities or weight.
That's a really good point. And I wanted to again go back to you, Amira, about the single gender environment that's there at Wellesley. Are there more questions about women's role in Islam when they see you and they know that you're a Muslim? Do you get more questions about that, or just women who are just trying to understand their place in maybe their own religion or in Islam? Do you get any gender-specific questions?
I get a lot of gender-specific questions, both from Muslims and non-Muslims. Many non-Muslims assume I'm the imam, so they're thrilled. Like my chaplain is, my imam is a woman or something like that. They just love that. I don't call myself the imam, but it's refreshing to them because they have never had this experience before, where there was a woman leading their community. In terms of gendered questions, well, first of all, I maybe we can pick this up in conversation later. It's probably more of an issue for people in higher education, but as we all know, gender identity is becoming more fluid in America. So we are learning along the way, and I think that we as a Muslim community need to address it and talk about it, because it's impacting our children and our students, and we're going to have to think about it and adjust. But in terms of, you asked about other questions that come up for Muslims, it's particularly, maybe I think you were asking about Muslim students. They ask a lot of questions about religious laws, and they express there's some tension in there around, for some students, not all students. Some students are like, I just don't buy it. Muslim women can be anything and do anything, and they're coming from a more constricted environment, and so that's maybe why they end up at Wellesley College. But other students, I think, are very comfortable with more traditional roles for women. And in that sense, it's harder for them to have conversations on campus about being true to those convictions, because we're in an environment, Wellesley College is all about women who lead. And so it's might be difficult for them to express that they are choosing intellectually and spiritually to have a more supportive role in society. And then there are students, I think, that have a tension between this desire to be everything they can be and not be seen as fully capable as men, and that they see that in the non-Muslim context, but not in the Muslim context, and it's difficult to work through.
Well, thank you for sharing that. I'm sure with all of you being in a leadership role, girls and young women look up to you, and women in general look up to you as just feeling more empowered. So thank you for that. And now we, Shakila, would you like to take us to the next section?
Yeah, and before we move on to another question, is I just wanted to say that the concept of journey. A couple of you mentioned that, and that this particularly the university campus environment is such a journey for so many young people and returning students as well, is that they've changed the course of the journey. I mean, the journey of being ill and going to, an unknown place and having uncertainty about their future. So it really comes through the compassion and the understanding with which you chaplain the people that you do, because understanding that each journey is different. Each one of us, the path that we're on, even if it's the same, we're going at different rates, being influenced by different things. So thank you for bringing up, the journey that we all go through. We have a couple of minutes before we kind of get into more personal questions. Let me go ahead and ask, is that interfaith work is, that's a hallmark for the Islamic Networks Group ING, and so much of what we have to do as Muslim Americans inherently. Do you do interfaith work, and what kind of interfaith work do you do? And, how is it that you bring that into the space that you're in? And whoever wants to go first, you are more than welcome.
So we pride ourselves in the interfaith work that we do at Howard University. It's where Howard Thurman was the first dean of the chapel. Howard Thurman took a student pilgrimage in the 1930s to India, where he met Mahatma Gandhi, and he did interfaith work like way back then in the 1930s. So he instilled that foundation of interfaith work at Howard University way back in the 1930s. So our whole campus is sacred ground for interfaith work. Our dean of the chapel installed a Muslim chaplain in 1994. So we have been doing interfaith work for decades, and it's all about what we do. Our students know that at the beginning of the semester, when we have our welcoming chapel service for incoming freshmen, that service includes speakers from of course, our Christian community, but also from our Muslim community, and to welcome our students, our new students to campus. Generally throughout the year, we have our chapel service every Sunday. And during the year, we have speakers from other faiths as well. So we've had Muslim speakers, we've had Buddhist speakers, we've had all kinds of different speakers. So we do a lot of interfaith work throughout the year. Our Muslim students, Christian students, our Hindu students all come together. We have something called an Interfaith Collegiate Corps, where they do activities together. Our university recognizes all faiths at holidays throughout the year. So, and even though we have a very small Jewish population of students, we have a Passover Seder that we do. So we do a lot of different interfaith activities on campus.
I'll just add to that. I mentioned the Multi-Faith Council that I lead, and my colleagues are wonderful. We have a rabbi, a reverend, and a Buddhist monk who are wonderful colleagues. We do a lot of things together. We lead labyrinth walks. Currently, we're doing a spiritual journaling, interfaith spiritual journaling, where we meet once a month and talk about this time of year where we're all anticipating, we are deep in religious and spiritual practice with Lent and Passover and Ramadan coming. So we're all experiencing that anticipation of something big while also contemplating our own self-restraint. So we try to work together as much as possible but we are, and then we do very forward-facing big events on campus that's for the whole college, that are like the oldest traditions at Wellesley College.
We're now going to ask you some personal questions, and please feel free to pass on them if you're not comfortable answering them. So, of course, this concept of, there's so much conversations now, thank God, about racism and countering racism. Have you faced Islamophobia and or racism while serving as a chaplain? If so, what can institutions who hire Muslim chaplains do to protect them from this type of treatment? Please go ahead.
And I will go ahead and add sexism to that. I mean, it's really, you play a unique role and a very important one. So,
great point. Thank you for adding that, Shakila. Anisa, would you like to start?
So not so much racism so much at Howard University. Howard University is a predominantly Black institution. It's a sacred space. Everything Black there is celebrated. So I don't have to worry about the racism there. I tell people Howard University, it's a fabulous place to be Black. It's an even better place to be Muslim. This is a fabulous place to be. And not even so much the Islamophobia, but it's kind of like a bubble for our students. They don't experience anything until they go off campus, and then go into mixing with sometimes other Muslim communities. And so for Black Muslims going to other campuses, and then they know about the struggles that other Black Muslim students are facing on other campuses, where the anti-Blackness is pervasive on other campuses. And a lot of times Black Muslim students from other campuses come to Howard University to socialize with our students because it's a safer space than it is for Black Muslims on their own campuses. So, and we welcome them because Howard University is a safe space for them. And so I work with Black Muslim students on other predominantly white institutions that are facing anti-Blackness on their own campuses. And so we welcome them to Howard. We recently had a Black Muslim Students Conference in the fall to celebrate what it means to be a Black Muslim student, because they face all kinds of challenges on their own campuses. And so we celebrated them, and they had their own conference because they do face pervasive anti-Blackness as a Muslim from other Muslims. It's very sad.
Oh, thank you. It's wonderful to hear about Howard University being a safe space.
Yes, it is a safe space. That's another wonderful reason for young people to consider Howard University. Yes.
Thank you. Sondos, welcome back. And if you'd like to finish what you were saying before, and also add to our question about Islamophobia, sexism, racism, what have been your experiences, and what type of support would you like to see, do you get, and what more support would you like to see?
I have 2 minutes only to answer this. No, I'm just kidding. Just to wrap up, my last point was that, so the Imam was asked about salvation in Islam, and his response, I think, could be well understood by a Muslim audience. And he said something to the effect of, Muslims get into heaven if God likes you. To a non-Muslim audience, that's very loaded. That can come with all sorts of connotations. And so the way that I offered it was a little bit of a reframe to say, salvation to Muslims is like we approach it from a very humble standpoint, knowing that our state of faith can shift from one day to another. And so we're constantly striving and seeking with the hope and with the faith that God is going to deliver on his promise of rewarding those who do good. And so that resonated with that audience because of the word humility and humble, because for that specific faith tradition, that was something that they upheld as one of their values. And so being able to redirect and translate what needs to be translated almost in a way that can be well received. For this point, oh gosh, I cannot tell you how many times people have tried to convert me upon coming into the room. Well-meaning patients and completely understand that they want to share their faith, but immediately they see me and it's like, she cannot possibly be happy or peaceful or satisfied with her faith tradition. I am obligated to share my own. There is an element of, obviously, you can tell a sense in a person's eyes with a patient, the discomfort or sometimes the fear when I come in dressed the way that I am. Whatever has informed their knowledge of Muslims and Islam from before, all of that gets projected onto me when I come in. And so there are different things that, I'm trained to do in order to diffuse that and help, move past that, or hand it off to somebody else. And then when just stepping away from me individually for a moment, I think in healthcare, most chaplains recognize that we play the role of advocate for patients across the board, but specifically for minority patients and minority ethnically and religiously, and Muslims fall into both. And so I think all of us have personal stories where we have ourselves or our loved ones who have been mistreated, overlooked, not cared for in the way that other people have been when they are staying in the hospital. And so my role there is to help educate the staff, and alhamdulillah, people have been very, very receptive, where, Muslim patients who maybe are not, are coping differently will be attributed to their faith and not maladaptive coping, whereas other people will be given that kind of excuse. So these kinds of, these realms that I've had to navigate, and I think institutions can help. I have to think about that one actually, but I think educating and just being a presence there, having more Muslim chaplains and more Muslim advocates in the healthcare system. There's a survey that's going around right now, and we can share the link. But informing research as well on this, I think, is very important. Numbers speak loudly. Numbers speak, right? Data speaks. To be able to do more research on this and present that to the community as something that we need to take care of.
Thank you so much. Again, the stereotypes that you are breaking just by being in the room is just phenomenal. Thank you so much for that. And last but certainly not least, Amira, what has been your experience, whether it's from a point of facing any racism or sexism or Islamophobia? How does that come into your daily life, and do you get support?
Okay, so, well, similar to Nisa's description of Howard University, at least as a woman at a women's college, I get more support and empowerment from the institution. The institution, like any other higher education institution, like I mentioned, has an environment that's very secular. So whereas the school strives for diversity and inclusion, it takes a lot of practice for them to be patient and listen and integrate new information into the way they do things. So, like, for example, I have been teaching them about Ramadan for the last 3 years and trying to incorporate that understanding into their general way of being. And in New England, people don't like to change how they do things. It's very difficult. It's not as adaptive as they are in the West Coast. But in terms of Islamophobia and racism, I have perhaps not been directly implicated. Maybe there have been incidents that were generally against Muslims, not necessarily directed at me, but generally, and I, as a Muslim, am affected by it. I hear stories from students about microaggressions, triggering assumptions in class that leave, or that they see on a WhatsApp group or on on an email group from other students, and it's very upsetting to them, and they don't really know how to manage it. And that's something that's definitely an ongoing project, because it's so hard to access it, especially if it's after the fact, or the student doesn't want to say who was it, or it was anonymous. It's very difficult to address that component. I back in my graduate school days, you may not know this about me, but I wore hijab for 25 years, and so I definitely experienced more Islamophobic attacks when I wore hijab. I'll pause there unless I've missed something.
No, thank you so much for that. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing those perspectives. Just a little bit of reflection and takeaways is that, you know, in a way, you're each in a unique environment, but yet I think though there's a bubble for a certain community and sometimes it seems like you're also in a great place and have taken the opportunity to really kind of share the goodness of that bubble with those who don't have the opportunities. So whether it's the conference that you're talking about, Nisa, or whether it's, you know, bringing the experience, Amira, or the fact that, you know, Sondos, you have an opportunity and have taken to engage other people in, you know, of Muslim tradition to serve hospitals. And we have great relationships with the hospitals in this area. And, you know, at first it was very, very tenuous thinking that we could be a chaplain at the hospital. But I will tell you is that it's really been very well received. And basically you're doing what Islam calls you to do, is serve people, you know, especially at a time when they're most vulnerable. And so thank you to all of you. It's really, you know, I know we could explore this endlessly, but being limited on time, let us go on to the next question. And it's as just as powerful one is that, you know, how do Muslim communities receive you as a chaplain? You know, are you respected as a religious leader? Do you speak in mosques regionally or elsewhere in the country? And what are the challenges you faced? I think it's really important for us to be able to understand that. So, Amira, maybe we'll start with you this time.
So yes, I mean, alhamdulillah, I feel in my local masjid very, very much included and sometimes asked to participate in programming. I also mentioned before how I wore hijab for 25 years, and so to answer this question, I feel like I need to include that component of a Muslim woman's life. It's something that you, like Sondos said, the moment people see you, they carry all of their assumptions about how you look to them. So whether you are in, and when I wore hijab, there were assumptions that Muslims made of me, and I challenged those, and there were assumptions that non-Muslims made of me, and I had to challenge assumptions in both scenarios. The same is true not wearing hijab. So it's just sort of reverse. So in a non-Muslim setting, they assume that I'm not religious or I'm more liberal or whatever, and I have to challenge them on that. And similarly, in a Muslim community, they assume that that my motivations might be vanity or I'm not knowledgeable or not religious, and therefore would not qualify for certain positions or speaking engagements, for example. So there's a lot of assumptions going on. Similarly, I'm biracial, so I've grown up living in these like liminal worlds of competing assumptions where people really don't know me at all. And that's maybe why I ended up in something like chaplaincy, where I'm really curious about getting to know the individual themselves. And also why I love things like Hafiz's poems that talk about how I think Hafiz says, this is a lunatic sphere and my address is with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So I laugh at the assumptions that people make about all of us, and I seek to know the individuals. Again, I'm sorry, I think I've gone off track from the question. but let me pass on to one of my esteemed colleagues.
But the beauty of this is that I think for people to understand the perspective that you bring and what your experiences have been in this role. So, you know, we're a whole person. So thank you for sharing that. Nisa?
Yes, so I'm definitely connected to the masjid. So the Masjid Muhammad, which is called the Nation's Mosque, is close to Howard University. It's about 10 minutes away. And our students go there for different events. They always generally have a welcome back for our students when we go back to campus. And our students go there for iftars. Our students go there for Eid events. And last year, not last year, but year before last, they had a big Eid on campus. And so I'm definitely connected with them and do speaking events at different, Islamic events around the country.
Wonderful. Sondos?
Alhamdulillah, I'm glad to hear from my fellow colleagues, and this might just be, our obviously our experiences, but I've had great support from Masajid, and actually I worked very closely with the third space here in Southern California called the Majlis, where I've been invited to speak on panels and give talks and do sessions, and I do office hours through there, also at the local Masajid. And now that we have Zoom and we can basically travel anywhere, other masajid in different states and different organizations, different countries have been reaching out and would like a chaplain's perspective, which is really refreshing from the back.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you.
Coming from leadership at a mosque, it's really, we have an amazing imam. We have a great team of people, both volunteer and staff, and it's really important that we really leverage the talent that exists out there that's not within our individual spaces, because there's just immense work that needs to be done and immense experiences that can be shared. So, Tabassum, if we're ready, I think maybe we want to transition to the closing. I know I could have listened to all of these wonderful panelists for another couple of hours, and I know we would have concrete subject matter to cover, but I want to respect our viewers' time as well. I want to thank each of you for taking the time to share with us. But before we do that, I think we want to do questions from the audience. So, Tabassum?
Yes, and actually, what I have learned so much about what it means to be a chaplain, and I'm sure there's a lot of enthusiasm among our audience as well. People, I'm sure there are individuals who did not know what it meant to be a chaplain and may even be interested in becoming a chaplain. So my question would be, what does it take to be a chaplain? We can, Sister Dr. Nisa, would you like to start with that?
Could you repeat the question, please? I'm sorry, I was looking at the questions in the chat. Go ahead.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So the question is, how does one become a chaplain, and what advice would you give to women seeking to become chaplains?
So becoming a chaplain is an amazing opportunity. I got my chaplaincy training at Harvard Seminary, and there are several universities that specialize in Islamic chaplaincy. And those are Harvard Seminary, Bayan College, the American Islamic College, as well as the Islamic Seminary of America. Those four specialize in Islamic chaplaincy. Now, depending upon what kind of chaplaincy you're interested in, whether it's prison chaplaincy, hospital chaplaincy, university chaplaincy, or military chaplaincy, you can get what's called a Master of Divinity at any university or program around the country. You can go and get a Master of Divinity to qualify you for chaplaincy. But if you specifically want to get training in Islamic chaplaincy, I suggest going to one of those four institutions, and that you can get the specific training for Islamic chaplaincy. Those four have a very excellent program.
Wonderful. Sondos, what would you, was your journey different because you're a hospital chaplain? And what would you advise women about becoming a chaplain?
I encourage anybody who's interested, please check out those programs. I'm a proud graduate of Bayan Islamic Graduate School and had a wonderful, wonderful experience there, earning my Master of Divinity degree. I would say for a hospital chaplain, it is very, very important, actually absolutely necessary to do clinical pastoral education, CPE. I am a CPE enthusiast, and I would say all chaplains need to take at least one unit of CPE. Preferably 2, really great if you take 4. And I don't have time to go into that, but that is basically like on-site training with a supervisor and a group of peers who are going through, and your training, and you're being given feedback on your chaplaincy and training. I was going to say that because this is a new field for Muslims, in the past, these roles were filled by beautiful servants of God who were volunteering their time and really out of the beauty and the goodness and the generosity of their heart, doing this out of the love for serving people. And now that we have these programs and we have these opportunities to do CPE, I think that it's really important for us. Our community deserves chaplains who are trained to the fullest, just like any other faith group. And I think we need to hold our institutions to that standard as well, that we don't have any excuse anymore for hiring chaplains who don't have any sort of background in chaplaincy, who maybe only studied classical religion or theology. That is not the same as being a chaplain. My advice for female chaplains, I interpret a portion of the seerah of our beloved Prophet ﷺ, where the first chaplain to me in our Islamic tradition is Khadija radiallahu anha. So if we want to derive our female chaplaincy from one of the most esteemed females in the seerah, from the life of the beloved Sallallahu, she enveloped him, she held him, she encouraged and affirmed him, Sallallahu Alaihi, when he first received revelation, and he ran to her fearful and in crisis, wondering what was going on and asking her to cover him. She was the one who took him in, who affirmed him, who encouraged him, and then she facilitated a meeting with her cousin who could help him more and understand more. And that is really encapsulates for me the role of a chaplain. So, and we have like rock star female leaders in our tradition, from Khadija radiallahu anha to Aisha, to Salama, and then down to our mystical saints, Rabia, Al-Adawiyya, and on and on and on. So we have a lot of rock star females to look to.
Thank you. Thank you, Sondos. And thank you for reminding us who our first female chaplain was. Certainly a lot of lessons for all women to learn from and be empowered by. And Amira, again, same question. What does it take to be a chaplain? But also, what are the uniqueness of serving an all-female student body, and do you need special preparation for that? That would be my question to you.
I don't think I need special preparation for that. I came at chaplaincy a little differently, and before there were these institutions, all of which I think are fabulous institutions that people should seek out. I was on an academic track studying, doing a PhD in Islamic studies, and also came from the camp counseling background. My parents started in California, Muslim Youth Camp of California, plugged to Muslim Youth, MYC. Anyway, so I sort of merged those two, and they seem to lend themselves really well for chaplaincy. I ended up leaving my PhD, and because I was taking care of my family and my mom, and chaplaincy was, especially in higher education, was a really nice way for me to continue my academic study of Islam, as well as the practical theological aspect of it with regard to supporting young people in their searches. So my advice to people who want to go into chaplaincy, especially young women, or any women in general, because we need everyone, regardless of age, is to really be yourself and seek your own light with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because that is what shines through for others. So don't try to imitate or make yourself something that you think you should be. Just seek within yourself your own door towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So I think that is key. Since I came from a different background, I would say, yes, go look at these institutions, but also if you're interested in exploring something else, there's so many other ways that you can support, especially in higher education. So you can try out different career paths, whether it be in residential life or in administration, or camp counseling. So if you're just wondering, just try things out and see if it leads to chaplaincy. And then lastly, I want to say, similar to what I think Sondos was getting at, is at least what I know about higher education is that chaplains are finding a paid career in chaplaincy, especially Muslim chaplaincy, might be challenging because there aren't that many resources for it. Many people, like Sondos said, are volunteer or part-time. And so I would encourage the whole community to support their masajid or other nonprofit institutions like Institute of Knowledge in Los Angeles to raise funds to support financially chaplains who will serve hospitals or especially higher education schools, because they don't have the resources to pay for a chaplain, but they are sorely needed. And what is typical for higher education is it's called a sending body. So the local college will look to the local churches and synagogues to send someone of their staff to support the students on campus. We don't have that installed in our structures, in our masajid. So I highly recommend that we start to think about investing for salaries for trained chaplains Muslim chaplains to then support, for example, the students at the local college.
Thank you so much. I mean, each of you, I think, provided very diverse and very necessary thoughts and perspectives for us to think about. And yes, so, we've spent, I think, the previous, or in my childhood, the decades building physical institutions, and now is our opportunity to strengthen the people infrastructure, the support infrastructure. And so this is one of the critical pieces of being able to continue to serve the community. So thank you for Amira highlighting that, and thank you to both Nisa and Sondos for your wonderful examples, and especially Khadija is my ultimate role model, so I couldn't agree with you more. Tabassum, if it's okay, we'll transition now to the questions from the audience.
Let's do it.
Okay, so sometimes, people of faith, and this may seem like it's directed just to Sondos, but and maybe we'll start with her, but welcome others to add in, is that people of faith give reasons for not taking care of their health, such as God will take care of it. I don't need to do anything about it myself. I'll pray and that will take care of it. And this can apply to taking prescription medicine from their doctor, taking care of their teeth, even issues of mental health. And what advice can the panelists give to healthcare providers who counter this kind of thinking?
Yeah, that's an important question. I do want to preface this with saying that how I would address this as a chaplain might be different than a healthcare provider would. As a chaplain, I am not there to change anybody's mind. I'm not there to force or enforce my perspectives of what is the best for maybe myself onto other people. The most I would do is maybe gently explore how this perspective has been informed by them. Has there been an experience in which they've been hurt in the past by medicine, or is this the way there was a stage, there are stages and levels until they reach that conclusion. So maybe working backwards to understand, but then you would have to have the time to really sit with the person. But we in the hospital, I come across patients of all different perspectives and faiths, and at different stages of faith, even where things are taken very literally, and then all the way to the opposite. And again, it's really about exploring and making sure that the individual is getting what they feel they need in that moment. And if they are looking for advice or to change that, then that is when I can offer that. But in the meantime, supporting them in the way that they want to be supported. And I know that might not be the answer that the health providers are looking for, but as a chaplain, maybe this is a good way of introducing or maybe further delineating what it is that we do and how it's different.
I think that's a wonderful approach. I love the way you said that everyone is on a different journey, and you're meeting them pretty much where they are, and without having an agenda of your own. And this pretty much you more or less answered the next question, but I'll ask it anyway, and perhaps Nisa can answer this in a different way. How do you give specific and consistent guidance when Muslims are so diverse, Nisa?
So I think the issue is that we help, for students, I help them find the answers for themselves because Muslims are so very diverse. And so when students come to me with an issue, I kind of reflect it back to where they are and where whatever specific theology they are familiar with. So I'm asking them, what does your theology, what does your understanding of this particular issue say to you about this? I'm asking them reflective questions to see what their understanding of it is. I'm not giving them answers. They're not coming to me, like I'm not the imam to give you a thick answer to this particular question. I'm going to help you on your journey to find your own answers. If I give you the answers, then that's not helping you be and understand how to solve this problem for yourself. I'm helping you on this journey to find the answer for this question for yourself. I'm going to help you solve this problem for yourself. So I'm going to give you some reflective questions to help solve this issue for yourself. So I'm going to help you with some questions. I'm going to help you figure this out for yourself with some questions to help you along this journey, along this path of discovery for the issue, because Muslims are very diverse. And it's a whole lot of Muslims that are around trying to figure out what's going on, especially for students. And so there's not one particular answer to one particular issue that students are faced with.
Thank you. Obviously, what you're sharing with us is really understanding the diversity and being able to be flexible in terms of explore, and understand better what it is that they're needing to know, what they're seeking, and hopefully then direct them if needed, but at the same time, help them pin it down.
Because a lot of times what the question is not really what they're trying to answer, what they're trying to ask. There's really more behind the question than what they're presenting with the question.
Right. So, let's delve a little bit into how are you, a Muslim chaplain, if you are guiding people to of other faiths, who may be totally opposite to Islamic teachings. I know Sondos touched on that a little bit. Amira, do you want to touch on that? And if Sondos had something to add, I think in addition to what we've already talked about, that'd be great.
Well, I think it's a wonderful entry into multi-faith conversations where we can share some wisdom from our own traditions and also demonstrate how we can listen to the wisdom from other traditions, and that helps people to feel comfortable with one another. On this particular point, one of the earliest teachings I heard from my dad was the hadith of the Prophet: tie your camel, right? And everybody knows the rest. tie your camel and leave the rest to God. So I think that I just lost my other thought. Nisa, how about you?
I think the thing is that we're not, as the question is, how are we guiding people to other faiths? We're not guiding people to other faiths. I want to make sure people are clear about that. We're using Islam to give people an understanding, a better understanding of our faith, in terms of helping them perhaps to get clarity about their own faith. So I think that in the question, there's a misunderstanding of what it is that we do. So I want to make sure that the questioner is clear about the question. We don't guide people to other faiths. As a Muslim chaplain, that would be a misnomer about what it is that we do. I mean, and is that helpful for you, Amira?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So I think as chaplains, all of us are clear as a Muslim chaplain. We're not guiding people to other faiths. We use Islam and in our clarity of Islam to give people an understanding of Islam by talking to them about what it is that we do and understanding of Islam, perhaps to give them clarity about their own faith. I'm going to give an excellent example. You know, tie your camel and leave the rest to Allah. You could say that in any faith, tie your camel and leave the rest to God. That is an example that could be a clarity for Christianity. I'm sure in other faiths. I mean, I grew up as a Christian, and I'm pretty sure I could give some examples of that at my Baptist church. My dad could use that example. So that is not a unique concept that Islam has a proprietary monopoly on. And so we're not guiding as chaplains, we're not guiding people to other faiths. We're using Islam to help people have an understanding perhaps of their own faith. Because if we're talking to people, we're not trying to hammer them with Islam and that's not their faith. I mean, that would be haram. I mean, we would be causing harm for them. And that's not what we're called to do as a caregiver, providing pastoral care.
Right. And I think, and again, I don't want to speak on behalf of the person that asked the question, but it may be guiding people from other faiths. And I think you've all addressed the issue very clearly in terms of your role and the fact that working in a multi-faith environment is essential, as a core principle of what you do. Tabassum, do you want to take the next question?
Yes. So we, as wonderful opportunities as Zoom meetings have opened up for us, the reason that we have now relied on Zoom meetings is the pandemic. And so there's a great question that's being asked is, what is the greatest opportunity or challenge that you face in the pandemic, or have you faced in the last year in the pandemic as a chaplain, knowing that so much of this service is really interpersonal, being there, maybe giving somebody a hug or just being close. How have you addressed that challenge? Amira, let's start with you.
Absolutely. I mean, not being able to hug a student when she's grieving is really hard. And to not be able to read facial expressions behind a mask or convey my emotion through the mask, that's really difficult. I've upped my social media game and I've started to do what I call 3 minutes to think about videos for my students, because they, it just interacting with me in 2 dimensions in email and Facebook is not optimal. And sometimes Zoom can be exhausting, and I want them to be able to access me in a more personable way. So that's one little thing that I'm doing.
Wonderful, thank you. And Sondos, you must really feel this in the hospital setting.
Absolutely. I think Amra touched upon the 2 main ones, which is the power and the healing effect of touch, and also being able to express with your face, which is hidden now behind a mask, your care. But there are ways to communicate care and love just through your eyes. I think the eyes are very expressive to utilize that. There's a little bit of touch that can be utilized, but I think for me in the hospital setting, probably the most challenging is with staff. In that they are experiencing a lot of moral distress around seeing not only a lot more deaths, but having patients in isolation because there are no visitors allowed anymore at the hospital. The isolation among patients is really, really at an all-time high. And so they're in need of more, which takes pressure, which puts pressure on staff. But also the interesting thing is that because families and loved ones aren't there to be able to see the patient and what they're going through, especially when they're close to end of life or when the prognosis is poor, denial, because if you cannot see it with your eyes, even when you see it with your eyes, you still have a hard time believing that your loved one is nearing the end. When you remove that and all they have are phone updates maybe once a day, it's really, really hard to fathom how I brought my loved one in 2 weeks ago and they were fine and they were talking and walking, and now you're telling me that I need to, we need to stop all treatment because there's no hope left. Like, absolutely not, keep going all the way, which is detrimental, obviously, for obvious reasons for the patient, but also the staff that have to continue that care while they're seeing the patient on a daily basis. So there are a lot of levels to how this is affecting us emotionally, spiritually, mentally. We don't have time for it, but I think that gives a little bit of a snapshot in the ways that chaplains have had to pivot the support.
Absolutely. Sondos, you are absolutely a frontline worker, as is Nisa and as is Amira. But I hope, and I'm sure Shakila feels the same way, that you are taking care of yourself as well, self-care. Because I cannot imagine doing what you do and seeing what you see. So certainly self-care.
Absolutely, our hearts are with you as a frontline worker, and so important and necessary. So I do want to have us, and we touched on this a little bit, but I would love to take the opportunity to have any of you that didn't get to share your thoughts on that, is that the fact that, how do you resist the Christian hegemony or dominance often associated with chaplaincy and pastoral care as a ministry?
So I think being rooted in Islam is the way to do that. I think really understanding and being rooted in Islam. And I think going to a program that specializes in Islamic chaplaincy helps you to be able to do that. I think part of the problem that we're seeing now is that Muslim chaplains today are going to Christian-centered programming. And so they're not getting the rootedness in Islam that you get when you go to a Muslim chaplain programming. And so their understanding of Islam is missing. And so they're going to a program, they're getting an MDiv, but their rootedness in Islam is really missing. And so I think to counter that, it's really important to go to a program that specializes in Islamic chaplaincy or do some external studying and getting that rootedness in Islam. And that helps you to be able to do that, to get away from the Christian hegemony because it's everywhere.
Yeah, beautiful, Nisa. I would only add that the landscape of chaplaincy is very different today than it was 15 years ago, 20 years ago, 10 years ago. And so there's a much greater diversity, and that's being embraced amongst many, many chaplains. And inshallah, in the fall of 2021, we are publishing a book on Islamic chaplaincy in North America called The Mantle of Mercy. That is an anthology and a collection of essays by Muslim chaplains talking about their experience and how they've embraced the role and function of chaplain. And hopefully this will also serve as a resource for non-Muslim CPE centers, seminaries, to add our voices and our narrative to the growing chaplaincy diversity. So be on the lookout for that book.
Wonderful. Thank you, Sondos. We have, I love the questions that are coming in, and I wish, and I'm sure Shakila feels the same way, that we could keep this conversation going so we can answer even more questions. But we'll try to squeeze in one more question, which is, how can a prospective chaplain pitch the need for one to a potential employer, like a university, hospital, etc.? Really practical advice is what they're asking for. Amira, would you like to start?
Yeah. Oh, this is our project. Like Sondos said, data speaks. Find out who wants a chaplain. Find out who could contribute funds for a salary for a chaplain. Get your foot in the door. Maybe it's like just 5 hours a week from a local, as like Sondos had said, maybe a volunteer or a current student of chaplaincy. Maybe they can do like an internship, or there are schools that offer some training through their, like Harvard, for example, has interns available that schools might be able to take advantage of, current graduate students. Let's see. What else? So funding and data, and also just connections with the school. Like find out who, maybe somebody's a professor or a staff member or something, and make those connections. And then lastly, alumni network. Just build your alumni network, and they will be a big push.
Nisa, would you like to add something?
Yeah, I would definitely say that. I would say talk to schools and do a field placement at a university or a hospital that does not have one. I did my field placement at Howard University, and they did not have a Muslim chaplain there. I did my field placement there, and alhamdulillah, I did such a good job, they hired me. And so that's the thing. You have to do and wow them with your expertise, wow the community, so that the students, and they knew they needed one. And so just go there, become necessary, connect with the students, connect with the faculty, connect with the staff, and just wow them enough so that they say, you know what, when you're gone, it's going to be such a big void. We really need to hire you and keep you. So go there. You become the pitch, become necessary, and they realize we can't do without you. They'll hire you.
Wonderful. Sondos, we'll give you just a few seconds to close, and then Shakila, you can take over the closing.
I think my beautiful, esteemed, honored colleagues said it all, mashallah.
Alhamdulillah. So, honestly, I said about 30 minutes ago that we could go on for a couple of hours, and I will say the questions from the audience have really brought this discussion to life. And so we really want to thank them for being so engaged, and want to respect their time as well. We want to thank each and every one of you for being with us today. Your insights, experiences have truly been invaluable. I also want to remind our viewers that this panel was put together by ING and is one of the many rich and diverse programs ING conducts throughout the year. You can most certainly, we'd love for you to support programs like this by visiting our website, www.ing.org, where there's a communion button, or you can just say www.ing/donate. We would very much for you to stay engaged and support ING as well. Tabassum, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Shakila. And thanks again to all our amazing panelists. You are truly an inspiration. Your contributions to your clients and to society cannot be overstated. And we're so grateful to you for all that you do. I also want to thank our audience members for joining us and asking such thoughtful questions. I look forward to engaging with you soon during a future ING program, and wish you all a blessed rest of the week. Assalamu alaikum, and peace be upon all of you.